There are people in important positions like the chief health advisor in the United Kingdom said, well, this could be a good thing because it would improve the breed. In other words, get rid of the elderly and the sick. And Jeremy Warner, who's a leading pundit with the Daily Telegraph, said that this is a good way to cull the herd, which is the line that's used by the anti-population crowd. I know that a lot of people in positions of power are not upset to see something that could wipe out tens of millions of people.
Hey friends, before we begin this interview with our longtime friend Harley Schlanger, just a piece of good news I wanted to share. One of my New Year's resolutions was getting these things up as a podcast on iTunes, and I've finally done it. You guys can now subscribe to the Propaganda Antidote over on iTunes, and for those who prefer to listen to these things as MP3s, fire away. I'm really glad to have this thing up. You'll find it on iTunes as the Propaganda Antidote, and I'll leave a link below to the iTunes podcast for this show, so thanks so much for your support. And now, just a quick word from this interview's sponsor. The spreading fear about the coronavirus is starting to make us realize how quickly things can change, but you can be prepared for the worst, even if the lights go out. Get one of the best solar banks on the market, the Backup Solar Bank. The good news is you'll never waste money on batteries again because the Backup Power Bank is solar powered. With dual USB ports, you can charge up to 2 devices at once, and you can charge your phone anywhere. This device is an all-in-one lifesaver, and I don't go anywhere without mine. Device features include solar-powered recharging, dual USB ports, 8,000 mAh battery capacity, LED lamp illumination, USB cable, and detachable compass. The Backup Solar Bank is the perfect device to assist you and your family when the lights go out, but limited supplies last, and it's your last chance to get yours at a discount before they sell out. Take advantage now and give you and your family the gift of power anywhere in the world. So visit backupsolarbank.com and use promo code SGT15 to save 15% off your order. I'll leave the link below this interview. Hey friends, welcome back. Thank you so much for tuning in. I very much appreciate it. We're going to go down the road of truth today with my friend Harley Schlanger because Harley's been a straight shooter with me for a long time, and I just shared some things before we started recording that I had concerns about, and maybe we'll cover some of those things on this call because I'm seeing all sorts of, let's just say, hopium out there, which is great. I'm hopeful. We're all hopeful. But at the same time, we've got to be pragmatic and honest about what we're up against. So we're going to talk about the reality of the situation we're facing right now. Harley, welcome back.
Hi, Sean. Good to be with you.
Hey, buddy. How is life in your neck of the woods? How are you holding up right now, first and foremost?
Well, I think as of tomorrow night, Sunday night, Merkel may be ordering a lockdown for most of Germany. As it is, there aren't too many people on the street. You know, there's a lot of pessimism, but Germany's always filled with pessimism. But, you know, I'm doing okay. My wife just got back from Austria where they want to put her into quarantine because she was in Austria, which has more cases than Germany. So, you know, we're dealing with it. I mean, this is reality. We're in a world that's going through a lot of chaos, and there are solutions. And as you were saying, to be hopeful that the solutions will be carried out is fine, but you've got to make sure you're fighting for the right solutions.
Yeah, that's right. And, let me ask you this. What are you hearing about Italy? I mean, you're probably seeing the same news we're seeing. They're running out of hospital beds. They're running out of respirators. They're having to make tough choices about who gets treatment and who doesn't. Therefore, who lives and who dies. It seems to be a real lightning point for coronavirus right now in the world is Italy. What are you hearing about Italy?
Well, I know something about it because I have colleagues in Italy. Marco Zanni from the European Parliament is a close friend of mine. I think he was on your program with me once. What they're saying is there are 2 problems in Italy. One was they didn't take seriously the need to prepare. And even though they have a good healthcare system, you had these pockets which exploded, pockets of infection. And, you know, at a certain point, you realize that to deal with something like this, you can't have a 40-year takedown of public health care and public infrastructure. And that's what we're dealing with in the West. And for people in the United States who initially were saying, well, look at China. China did things wrong. They didn't handle it properly. Look at Italy. They didn't handle it properly. Well, look at the United States. We lost a couple of months where we could have been preparing. So I think the worst case scenario can be avoided. But the real question is, if you have emergency measures, fine, you need them to save lives. But if you keep the same system, we're just going to have this again, and it's going to get worse. So I think in Italy, the one thing that they're concluding in Italy is that they've got to get out of the European Union. And this is an important point. The European Union initially said Italy could not have a $7.5 billion bond offering to upgrade their health care because it goes against EU rules. So the Italians said to the European Union, screw you, we're not going to do 7.5 billion, we're going to do 25 billion. And so they're ignoring the European Union, and they forced the European Union to drop their plans for bail-ins and budget cuts. And so, I think we're seeing a continuation and possibly a growing of the rebellion against the global system. But, that's been going on. The question is, what will replace it?
Yeah. Well, I think that's absolutely fantastic. And I've been saying, you correct me if I'm wrong, we have the information coming from Professor Francis Boyle and others who've looked at this thing. And here's what I've been saying. We were winning. Humanity was winning, right? Trump, 2016, Brexit, Trump, 2020. And so they released a bioweapon. I mean, that's really how I feel about it. When you look at the Bill Gates Foundation, Event 201, all of this fear-mongering for so many years, Bill Gates giving a TED Talk in 2015 about the next crisis that will take out 10 million people isn't a mushroom cloud, it'll be a microbe. It's almost wishful thinking, or what? Telegraphing? Have they been telegraphing this for that long, Harley?
Well, all the things you cited are definitely have taken place. The war game, you might say, the scenario that they did back in October. If they actually were serious about that, why didn't they make preparations? Why weren't they better prepared? Now, here's where you get to the more satanic element involved in this. There are people in important positions, like the chief health advisor in the United Kingdom said, well, this could be a good thing because it would improve the breed. In other words, get rid of the elderly and the sick. And Jeremy Warner, who's a leading pundit with the Daily Telegraph, said that this is a good way to cull the herd, which is the line that's used by the anti-population crowd. So, at this point, I can't know. I don't know enough about it to know whether it's a bioweapon that went bad or what it is exactly. But I know that a lot of people in positions of power are not upset to see something that could wipe out tens of millions of people. And that's the thing that we've got to concentrate on, stopping this thing, and then making sure that the people who have been running things for the last 50 years are removed from power. And if we don't do that, they're going to do it again, and they have the power to do it.
All right, I'm going to get into dangerous territory here simply because I don't believe in infighting, and that's not what this is. What I'm about to say is not, and anybody who's going to misinterpret that, shame on you. I'm not infighting. I like Dave over at X22. I like Bix Weir. I love all of the Patriots. We're all in this mess together. But I've been seeing comments under my videos, why aren't I talking more about Q? Why aren't I being more hopeful? And as I explained to you at the beginning of this interview, I'm trying very hard to be pragmatic and truthful about what I'm seeing. And I just want to cite a couple of examples, Harley. One of my friends on YouTube just recently did a video saying how now, unlike in 2008, when the bankers come for more bailouts, Congress will say, hell no. But that's not true. Right now, they're talking about a $2 trillion stimulus package on the back of all of this other stuff the Fed has been doing, Harley. And Dave over at X22 talked about how the president has these people right where he wants them by doing a payroll tax cut, which will allow the people to keep everything they earn, and that'll wake everybody up, and we'll never go back to the old way. A payroll tax cut at best would give people an extra 6.2% of what they earn. Not everything that's taken from them in federal and state taxes. So I'm just trying to be pragmatic about what I'm seeing. What are you seeing?
Well, I'll make 2 points. And the first one is on this question of Q, this idea of trusting the plan. If you go back to when Trump first came in, people said, trust the plan, trust Sessions. He knows what he's doing. Trust this one, trust that one. You can't trust any of them. And the idea that there are some white hats behind the scene who are manipulating things and are going to make things get worse and worse and worse to help people wake up, I don't buy that. I think that creates spectatoritis. It turns people into spectators instead of activists. And they spend their time trying to decode Q rather than going out and raising hell in their communities to get more people active. So I've never been one who believed in this trust the plan statement. Now, the second point you're making is really important. We're dealing with an oligarchy that has had its way for the last 50 years, since even a little longer, since the assassination of John F. Kennedy. They got Nixon to decouple from the Bretton Woods system, which meant ending the reserve, gold reserve for the dollar, and at the same time going to a floating exchange rate, ending the fixed exchange rate. For the last 50 years, they've been using banking deregulation, deregulation of markets, the repeal of Glass-Steagall, and on to create one bubble after another. And some people say, well, that's what they're trying to do. These bubbles are what they intend to do. They intend to control the world. This is an imperial system. And they're stupid. They don't know how to do it. And so they keep making mistakes. But they've been able to continue this because they've had a compliant Congress and a mostly unawakened population. Now, the reason for some hope is that people started waking up during the second term of Obama. And I think this is why you had Brexit, why you had the Trump election. You've had rebellion in country after country. The major political parties are collapsing because people are saying, look, I don't know what I need, but I know what we've got is no good. I don't like being lectured to. I don't like being told that I'm the cause of the problem. And meanwhile, this oligarchy is moving ahead with their next phase, which is the bubble economy, to rescue the bubble. That's what these $1 trillion repo deals are, the 1.5 trillion new quantitative easing. You know, the money's flowing in huge amounts, and it's in the open this time. Remember, in 2008, the only thing that was in the open was the TARP bailout. Now it's all out in the open. But are people going to tolerate it and accept it? Now, if you say, oh, this is great because now it means Trump has them where he wants them. Trump has been fighting against this corrupt, immoral gang of criminals, but he hasn't been winning every fight. And you still have people like Mnuchin in there. The idea that somehow Mnuchin is going to move to take power away from Wall Street and the City of London is absurd. So you've got too many of these swamp or deep state people in positions of influence and power. The media is still with them. The fact that they're going along with a bailout, that, you know, people think, oh, that's good because we're going to get a little bit of money. That's just bribery. You know, and the money you're going to get is going to be diluted because they're giving so much more, pumping so much more into the system to save the system that eventually the dollar is going to go into confetti money, helicopter money as it's called. So I think the important thing is that the people who are running things are incompetent. They've set up the conditions for their fall, and their system's collapsing. The question is, will we have enough people who understand what they're trying to do, how they're doing it, and how to change it? And that's why at LaRouche PAC, we've been calling repeatedly for a return to banking regulation, which means you take the power away from the central banks, you take away their bailout power, their ability to run Ponzi schemes, new bubbles, you take it away. That has to be done. Now, some people don't like that because they say, well, that was Franklin Roosevelt's policy. Well, it worked for a long time. It prevented the banks for a long time from controlling everything. But starting with Nixon in '71, they repeatedly took power away from the regulators and gave it all to the central bankers, including the Federal Reserve. And just to add one final footnote to this, anyone who thinks the Federal Reserve is going to do something that's going to help them hasn't studied the history of the Fed or the history of the last 50 years or the bubbles that we've had since 1987 one after another, which have popped. And after they popped, conditions got worse for working people, for people involved in manufacturing and industry and infrastructure, and were totally preferable treatment for the bankers. So that's the reality. Now we've got to make sure that that ends.
I'll do a screen share here. Can you see that? Okay.
Let me see, just a second.
It's okay. I'm just showing QAnon.pub because
Yeah.
in the interest, I brought up Q. And look, I do not dispute the fact that white hats are engaged in a battle against these evil people. I will never dispute that. I'm a supporter of this Q theme and the white hats. I just want to share this with folks, though, because with all these new videos coming out from people I like in the space talking about checkmate and Trump has him right where he wants him and arrests are imminent, there are only four, I believe, let's check that. Yeah, four recent posts from Q, all from March 9th. So they're not even recent. And it's really basic stuff like God wins. Okay, yeah, I agree. And this tweet from President Trump, the Obama-Biden administration is the most corrupt administration in the history of our country. Yeah, agreed. I just don't know how you conflate these most recent posts into some of the most dramatic work I've ever seen being done by some of these folks. And again, I'm trying to stay rooted in reality because we know who the enemies of humanity are. I just don't see such a silver lining around every corner. Not every bit of news is the best possible news ever. Like right now we're seeing troops in New York City. They're trying to lock down New York City because of this thing. So here's some pragmatic good news. How about hydroxychloroquine? That malaria drug, and folks, I saw this in the comments yesterday too. It's not a vaccine, okay? I'm not suggesting you take a vaccine. I'm saying there's a malaria drug when combined with an antibiotic. I think it was zithromycin. I don't have it in front of me. I'm trying to remember. Hydroxychloroquine, when combined with this antibiotic, helped 20 out of 20 people get better in trials. Now, that's a game changer, right? And President Trump has been talking about it. And of course, NBC News, that reporter over at NBC News just wanted to fearmonger. He said, what do you tell the millions of people of Americans who are afraid? And President Trump said, I tell them you're a terrible reporter.
Terrible reporter. That was a great response.
Isn't that a great moment? So, yeah, I mean, there's good news. There's actual tangible good news out there, Harley.
Sean, there are people who are fighting. When I said that people who are waiting for the white hats to ride to the rescue, I'm not saying there aren't good people in the various institutions and outside the institutions, former people, former diplomats, former intelligence people who want to fight. And President Trump gave them an opportunity to do that. But you're dealing with an entrenched, bureaucratic, administrative elite. We saw this in the Roger Stone case. And when Trump put out his comments on it, you had 1,100 former Justice Department officials came out calling for Barr to be removed when they were opposing the draconian sentence of Roger Stone. So you've got a very powerful enemy there. And you have to understand that. And it's not just a question of a couple good guys who are going to win the fight. What made this fight work is that people throughout the country voted for Donald Trump in 2016. And there's this bull about Hillary got more votes. It doesn't matter. Trump won the Republican nomination by mopping up the Bush crowd, the intelligence crowd in the Republican Party, and then did the same thing to the Clinton crowd in the general election in a way that was smart enough to get the Electoral College victory. How did he do that? He went out and appealed to the people by attacking the Wall Street elites, by attacking the warmongers, the war hawks, attacking the globalists, attacking the neoconservatives and neoliberals. So he laid the basis for a popular rebellion. And that rebellion is still there. And I think it's going to grow, especially as we see the damage that's been done by the existing establishment. I was very struck by President Trump when he was criticized for not being prepared. And he said, look, the last two administrations were the ones that tore down the hospitals and cut back the public health programs. He's absolutely right about that. It's actually been 40 years of destruction of hospitals and public health in the United States. And it was done by the people who are now criticizing Trump. So Again, there is a way out. And here's the other thing that I think is really interesting. People who previously said they were against bailouts are now coming out for bailouts. Why? Same reason they did in 2008, because the system is threatened. Well, the system's no damn good. It's failed. Put it through bankruptcy reorganization. That's what LaRouche said back in July 2007. He said that the banking system, there's no way the banking system won't crash because of the mortgage-backed security bubble. And he said, the question is, what do we do afterwards? And afterwards, we had Bush and Hank Paulson working for Wall Street to come out with a bailout. Obama came in and put the bailout on steroids. And then they included in Dodd-Frank a bail-in provision to protect the criminals. So now we're at a point again where the system's about to crash. Are we going to let them do the same thing again? So it's not a question of expecting the Congress to vote down the bailout or to do something against the Fed. The American people have to express the view that they don't want this anymore. We want to go back to physical production. We want to go back to rebuilding our country. And that's what President Trump appeals to. So the white hats, in a sense, are the American people who don't go along with this crap.
Several times since this crisis has emerged, Harley, I've played the soundbite now from Representative Kinjorski, Paul Kinjorski from 2008, or was it 2009? Regardless, I think the event was in 2008. He was on C-SPAN talking about the fact that there was a run on money markets. September 11th, 2008 was the date. A run on money markets to the tune of trillions. Had they not shut it down, by 2 p.m, there would have been $7 or $8 trillion sucked out of U.S. money markets, and the entire system would have collapsed, and the whole global system would have collapsed. So they shut it down. I've played that soundbite because I want people to understand the economic enemies of humanity have so much firepower at their disposal. So now we've seen the stock markets around the world crashing because of this coronavirus. And again, that's how they manipulate people into fear, right? You watch your retirement savings disappear in a month. Everybody gets a little concerned. So with all that said, let me do another screen share here. I brought it up earlier. What do you make of what they're trying to do to save small businesses and medium-sized businesses? So many businesses in this country are shut down right now. Bowling alleys, movie theaters, basically any leisure thing you can think of shut down. Restaurants, bars, it's all shut down. Real people are hurting. And now the Congress critters are talking about a $2 trillion stimulus package. What should they do? How do we take this system back? The enemies of humanity have the deck stacked against us as they crash the markets. What in the hell should we do?
Well, I think the first thing that should be done is the market should be shut down for a while. Put them on a holiday and tell them we're going to sort out the bad paper from the good paper, and they're going to have to eat the bad paper. Now, look, that means people who have pensions and 401ks and things of that sort in this are going to be hurt by it. But more importantly, it's going to completely smash the hedge funds, the Wall Street crowd, the shadow banking system. Now, what you do then is you immediately have to guarantee that there will be credit, not handouts, not bailouts, but credit that will go to production. The problem, Sean, is that we have a banking system that's addicted to risk, because risk is how they've become accustomed to making money. Once you financialize everything, you securitize everything, the more risk, the higher return. That's why 40% of corporate bonds that have been issued since 2015 are triple B or lower. That means junk bonds. And the banks are buying them. They're taking on commercial paper that's worthless. Even with the stock market, stocks of companies that are not producing enough money to pay the interest on their debt, their stocks are soaring because of the speculative bubble. That's not the way it should work. That's not capitalism or free market. That's a rigged system. Now, we should shut that down, whether we declare a bank holiday or a trading holiday or a pause or something like that. That would be the proper thing to do rather than shutting down everything that's productive. Now, we may have to do certain kinds of measures to get through this coronavirus thing. But more importantly, what we've got to do is ensure that the credit will go to producers. And that means you have to free the banking system of this debt. And it means it's got to be written down, written off, or totally reorganized. That's what Wall Street and the City of London don't want. They want to keep trading what are worthless assets. And they can do it as long as the Fed gives them money overnight. You know, if you go back to this, and I know I was on with you since last September, but it was last September 17th when this whole repo situation shifted from banks doing the repo loans to the Federal Reserve. It was initially 20 billion, 30 billion, went up to 70 billion. No longer just 24-hour overnight loans, it went to 14 days or 43 days. Now we're at the point where it's almost $1 trillion overnight every night. Where's that money going? There's obviously hedge funds that have sprung leaks. There's obviously systemic banks like Deutsche Bank, which are on life support. Now, what has to be done is that has to be stopped. And as long as there's a certain amount of disruption in the economy, let's use it as an opportunity to correct the errors rather than compound those errors with these kinds of bailouts. So there's a difference between a bankruptcy reorganization and extension of credit through the Treasury to producers. There's a difference between that and bailing everybody out. Now, in the meantime, if you do that, make sure that producers have money, a lot of these mom and pop shops and small businesses will get credit and cheap credit, but the credit will be frozen for the biggest players who need credit overnight so they can keep selling worthless assets, trading them for a profit. So that trading has to stop, and we need a bankruptcy reorganization.
All right, we'll go back. We'll do another screen share. Good news from our president. And again, I would just like people to at least look at the cup as half full. I'm trying to do that, guys. I'm not going to only give you hopium. I'm going to give you the truth as I see it. And in my view, we are still very blessed that Hillary Clinton isn't in the White House, because I could pretty much guarantee you that hydroxychloroquine would be tied up at the FDA right now, and it would be going through trials and trials and trials and trials before they ever approved it for coronavirus. That's my view. And this president is saying, be put in use immediately. People are dying, move fast, and God bless everyone. He retweeted Michael Cordry's tweet saying, new data, French study has demonstrated evidence that the combination of hydroxychloroquine and azithromycin are highly effective in treating COVID-19. The patients enrolled in the study showed complete viral eradication around the 5th day of treatment. Again, it's good news, okay? It's not a vaccine. Maybe that's the best news I can share. Again, I saw that in the comments last night under a new video I posted. I'm not taking the vaccine. What, now you're mandating vaccines, Sean? You approve of vaccines? No, this isn't a vaccine. It's a treatment. And it's really good news that the president's talking about it. All right, Harley, I really appreciate your time. I did actually ask in that video, at the end of that video I posted last night, if anybody had any questions for you. I only saw a couple come in, one of which is, and obviously we know the answer to this, does Harley recognize the evil the CCP has done to the beautiful citizens of China?
Well, look, I'll tell you a couple of things on that. The Chinese government is being forced to deal with the crisis. Whether they created it or not, I don't know. I can't tell you. But the Chinese government has been doing what they can to not just stop it in China, but to work with other countries. And I think the important thing now is not to point fingers. The way President Trump is dealing with it is he continues to praise Xi Jinping. So the question is not just for me, what about President Trump? He certainly understands who Xi Jinping is and what the Chinese Communist Party is. On the other hand, what he said is that he knows we can work with them. And he proved it with the trade deal that he worked out. So I think rather than try and build an enemy image here, we need to look beyond that to solidarity with all of God's creatures on this planet. And I find some of the anti-China stuff is really silly. I mean, would we want the Chinese government here? Would we want a government like that? No. But that's not the issue. That's the government they have over there. Can we work with them for the betterment of the people in China, as well as for people in Africa and elsewhere that the Chinese are involved in? So people who accuse me of being an apologist for the Chinese Communist Party know nothing about what I've been saying on this for years. But on the other hand, I think this is the point in history where we have to go back toward what was done at the end of the 30 Years' War in 1648, which is to recognize that the solution to these kinds of geopolitical crises, these confrontations and wars, is to act in our interests by recognizing the interest of the other. That's the Christian thing to do. That's the whole point. So I think the solution here is that we do what we know is right for our country, and we don't fear engaging with other countries, either in dialogue or in disagreement. That's one thing that I appreciate so much about President Trump. And you mentioned Hillary. Hillary's approach would be to take an ideological hardline approach, which would never allow any progress and would continue the regime change wars that have cost us so much in lives of men and women and money. President Trump is not doing that. And I think that's why he deserves to be reelected, because he's represented a viewpoint which is consistent with the greatest presidents we've had, that our strength is not our ability to destroy other nations, but to demonstrate the superiority of our Constitution. And that's what I like about President Trump.
Yeah, me too. I love the common sense approach. I've often played that video of the little boy at the signing ceremony in the Oval Office hugging the president. That signing ceremony was for the right to try bill, for terminally ill patients who have no other choice but death. It was a bill allowing those people to try experimental drugs that aren't FDA approved. Obviously, what a common sense approach. That's a pro-life, pro-human executive order, and that's our president, allowing people who are terminal to at least have a shot. Why not try experimental treatments? And again, we would never see that from Hillary Clinton, Harley, who was in the pocket of the FDA.
But Sean, also, what he's trying to do with Afghanistan, some people are saying, well, the Taliban are bad. Yeah, they're bad, but is that our problem? Can we create a situation militarily which will stop it? The answer is no. We've been doing it for 20 years at a great expense to our own nation and our own people. And this is where President Trump won the election in 2016 by saying he was not going to do what Hillary wanted to do in Syria. And because he won, the terrorists in Syria are nearly wiped out. So I think, again, the approach that he's taken is the right one. And we don't have to prove to people that we have more firepower and more weapons. That's not what makes us a strong country. It's the fact that we have a constitutional system which starts with the standpoint that everyone has a right to life and a right to develop their creative potential for the good of all. And that's what our government should represent. And I think in much of what President Trump has done, that's what he reflects.
Yeah, amen. All right, well, as we wrap up, I just want to come full circle and say, I love Dave over at X22. I love all of the Patriots. I just wanted to clarify my position because I continue to be asked by folks, why aren't I talking more about Q? Why aren't I being more hopeful? I'm trying to be as hopeful as I can with the facts as I see them. Harley, you know how much I appreciate your time. Thanks for joining us on this Saturday. I hope to post this by Sunday night. Thank you so much.
And Sean, if people want to get in touch with me, as always, harleysch@gmail.com. And if you disagree with me, send me a note. I'll be happy to argue with you over email. But it's harleysch@gmail.com. And if you agree with me, let's work together to actually get some solutions.
Yeah, absolutely, Harley, and thank you for that. And guys, reach out to Harley and be kind, be diplomatic. We're all in this mess together. The point I'm just trying to make, and I could have probably made it more clearly earlier by mentioning exactly this, just the other day, there were these memes running around that Oprah Winfrey had been arrested. Absolute poppycock, absolute nonsense. We all have to be very careful about the type of information that's being shared. There are real criminals out there. There are real pedophiles and pedivores out there. Horrible human beings. We know who they are. We pray for their arrests. They should all be in Gitmo right now. I absolutely concur. I wish they were. It doesn't appear that they are quite yet, folks. So let's keep our eye on the real news. Let's support each other, and let's be pragmatic about the situation we face, lest we find ourselves in $50 trillion of debt and no purchasing power of our dollar. Harley Schlanger has been our guest from LaRouche PAC. Thank you, Harley.
Thank you, Sean. Good being with you.
Good being with you, sir. Thank you. And guys, thank you so much for your support. We very much appreciate it. And for real news 24/7, you can visit us directly at sgtreport.com, the antidote to corporate propaganda. God bless you one and all. God bless your families. Stay safe out there. Bye-bye.
Just remember, always be forbearant and try to be compassionate, but be firm and to not have fear. This fear actually creates a digital field throughout the entire world, and that can actually cause worse things to happen.